Hello, class. I'm just kind of briefly just touching up on what I thought was a little bit of a scatterbrained announcement. And I felt like it was a little bit random also when I was thinking about the topic, the subject matter, when I was bringing up about the ladyboy transgender catoid slash issue within Thailand. And just kind of like what I was trying to say, articulate in regards to looking at Southeast Asia in context to all this other Asian history, East Asia that we're covering. And so I just wanted to clarify a few things. So first of all, like many travelers and Westerners coming to a new environment, you're always, I think anytime you're, well, just any person who's traveling to a new environment will be shocked often to see what kind of things are common or not common, and how a society will deal with them as opposed to your own, these kind of situations. And that for me has been true of things like going to the bathroom, the sharing of public space. I mean, it's interesting here in Hong Kong, you know, you go to a restaurant and it's packed full of people, and if there's a small table full of people around it and there's one space left, they just send you right there to that spot. And you don't really talk to the people necessarily. It's a little awkward for me coming into it at first, but this is how things are done here. So you say, oh wow, okay, like, you know, for us, you know, you get a table by yourself, you know, you wait, right? Little things like that. Anyhow, but trying to really just kind of like mention Southeast Asia in terms of the history of the time period we're covering, this is what I needed to make clear. So this book, and I'm going to read a little portion of this book, and partly why my announcement may have been a little bit random seeming is I actually had a broader set of points I wanted to bring out, and I just had the book, that one book, when I was at the park. So anyhow, this is Modern Southeast Asia. I may have actually recommended this book before, I can't remember. I bought this in the Netherlands. This is put out by University of Hawaii Press. It's a very good, comprehensive work on all of Southeast Asia. Now, what this book talks about is that basically the time periods that we're covering in this history class, there is very little sources on Southeast Asia outside of travel, maybe a Chinese diplomat or a European traveler going into this part of the world. Not a lot of documentation. And so really this is called Modern Southeast Asia, the emergence of. And they're really talking about like 17th, 18th century on up in terms of Southeast Asian history and the way that it's developed and been integrated into the world economy or whatever. And so when it comes to trying to understand a lot of things about their culture, and the reason why I brought up Katoy, for example, is I wanted to also clarify, there are many things throughout Southeast Asia that I noticed that are similar in other parts. So I went to the Philippines, and I also noticed a lot of what would be called lady boys. Now, this book was basically talking about how prior to Christianity, Buddhism, and Islam, and Hinduism, but especially the other three that I just talked about, the whole region practiced animism. And you could talk about animism, the belief in spirits, you know, that there's a spirit of a lake or a tree. That's something that's even very common within Europe and before Christianity with pagans, which I find interesting. So you see that in Africa, Native American, in Europe, a kind of a religious set of beliefs that is not put down to writing, that's been practiced for who knows how long. And so the approach to life and everything is very different. And then you get Buddhism coming in Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity into Southeast Asia. And these are religions with textbooks, with books that tell you how to live, have explanations for existence and creation and things you can pin down. And so we don't have that for what the people were thinking and how they were doing and approaching everything in life before that. But what all these books have talked about that I've been reading and what I've experienced is that, and I think our textbook does actually touch on this a little bit, is that in Southeast Asia, and I assume as much as Asia, and like I said, even other parts of the world, there was animism, and you see it in Thailand, the animism, the belief in spirits and spirits being associated with places and locations is a very common thing. And it's integrated into the Buddhist system when you're in Thailand. My understanding is that in Malaysia, they even do that with Islam, and that you see that in certain parts in the Philippines with Christianity. So you have spirit houses in Thailand where you go and they actually leave the Fanta soda, the red dyed, the sugary soda, they leave it out for the spirits like almost every morning sometimes. I used to walk by all the time and I'd see the spirit houses. Sometimes, and here's, I want to say something. Officially, Buddhism is vegetarian. And even Thailand is so Buddhist. And this girl a woman that I've been hanging out with there, she reads me a text about she's very devout into Buddhism, and she's reading me the text of Buddhism, and it talks about not harming or killing any animal. And I said to her, we ate like meat soup at the temple. You guys eat more meat. It's easier to be a vegan or a vegetarian in Portland, Oregon than it is in Thailand. And she just kind of like, oh, right. I mean, people are basically not vegetarian, even at the temple. Okay? At least that's my observation a million times over. And maybe there's some I even went to one temple and it said, vegetarian restaurant. And then I just saw a bunch of shellfish and fish stuff up there. Maybe that's what counts as vegetarian. So what you kind of also see is that there's official belief systems and there's what people actually do in practice, and they can be very different. So remember that as we're studying history. When I'm having you study and learn about these religious systems, it's possible, especially when we go back to ancient history and we have a text telling us that this society did X, Y, or Z, that may have been the ideal that was barely ever practiced, right? Okay, so historically we know that anytime religious priests, whether it's monks or even the Catholic Church or anything, in all due respect, that say they're going to be celibate, we know that that's the rule, and historically we know that people who join religious orders to be celibate are not always celibate. Okay, so there's an ideal and then there's the actual practice, and that can be very different. So I just wanted to point that out. Sometimes I'll even see like a chopped off pig's head on a plate with some soda being left for some spirits. I'd be like, whoa. That's pretty. I mean, I stumbled across this walking. So you have all that. Now, the approach that these systems had, I think, gender and sexuality and lots of these different things have a little bit more fluidity that were happening prior to the religious systems coming up. But with the Buddhist system, I just want to say, I went to the Philippines. I'm talking to Christians that are very much trying to talk about Christianity. What do you think? Where do you stand on Christianity? What's your relationship with Jesus? I haven't been to the Muslim parts yet of Southeast Asia, but I know I have a lot of Muslim friends. They care a lot about what your thoughts about Islam. I went to the Buddhist temples. The priests never ask if you're a Buddhist or what you think about Buddha. Do you have Buddha in your life? Do you have a relationship with Buddha? There's nobody asking you this question. You go to the temple and they have some formulas. And if you want to get the blessings, you got to go do the formula. You're going to bring some gifts, or you're going to say a prayer, you're going to bow, you're going to be respectful, you're going to repeat back a prayer. But nobody's asking what you think or feel. It's just kind of like, hey, there's this thing that we do. If you do this, you're going to get a blessing. You're tapping into the universe's like flow, and it's going to make things happen well for you. So this is what's going to happen if you do this. That's it. That's how it works. And so even though they do have like strong opinions about certain types of things, for the most part, it's a very relaxed approach to a lot of questions. So questions of homosexuality and gender and all these things, they have thoughts about them, but overall I see their society not obsess over them in the way that I even see like ours in the United States. And that's kind of what I was wanting to address. Now, having said that, I don't want to take too much more of your time. I thought I would just read an interesting part of this. Bear with me here from this book. And it's on political scarcity, modes, and defining authority. So it says, the real originality of Southeast Asian politics in the 1700s does not lie in monarchy's universal claims. It is to be found in the regional juxtaposition of so many different approaches to universal ideas. Southeast Asia was historically unique in harboring a large number of monarchies, all much more moderately sized than the Holy Roman Empire or China or Mughal India or the Ottoman Empire, which shared the same material environment but differentiated themselves by their commitments to the standards of universality of one of the world's major creeds, Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism, Islam, or Christianity, within a relatively limited geographic compass. No other region of the world of this size had such a multiplicity of political universalisms. There was not even a common elite language to link the monarchies to each other, unlike the classical Arabic of the Middle East empires or the Latin one shared by European monarchies. Apart from the variety of the world systems to which Southeast Asian monarchies attached themselves, they had a second arresting feature that affected their politics. That was their relative shortage of people. In the 18th century, Southeast Asia probably had roughly half the population density of Europe at the time. I'm just going to finish there. Interesting, right? And that also kind of, I think, helps explain a little bit what's hard to kind of pin down about the region. And I just want to point out here, I have this book, and this is what we would call in the simply a propaganda book, but it's a book celebrating the life of the king, a very beloved in Thailand. This is the last king before the last late king, not the newest one now, but this is Rama IX, Raja Rama IX, king. I never have been to a place where a political leader was that loved by everyone, and I really think it's genuine. And I studied his life, and he really did devote a lot of his life of doing what kings are supposed to do. But it's also, from an American point of view, a little, there's something off for us in this approach. His picture's everywhere, and he's portrayed as somebody who was like the father king, this kind of godlike patriarchal figure who was there intervening in everybody's lives, even though he's not an absolute monarch. He didn't have absolute power, but his presence was felt so much. And I'll just give you a sample of some of the language here in the chapter 17 on royal father. Imagine the feelings of the hill tribe people when they saw the different kind of party climbing up the mountain from the jeeps far below. Leading the way was a wiry, suntanned figure wearing sunglasses and cap. Struggling to keep up with him were the rest of the border patrol police and officials. Here, high in the remote mountain wilderness, was a hereditary lord of life, His Majesty the King, sitting on the floor of the village headman's house and sharing a poor man's dinner of rice with chicken. Talking with them, not criticizing them. Now, what we have is the king making his presence felt everywhere, and intervening and being a caring fatherly figure, and putting on a role that people adore. And you know what's very similar to this? The way that North Korea approaches their leaders. And when the North Korean leaders die, it's very similar to how Thailand reacted to him when he passed away. I think that this idea of divine kingship or something about the ruler and this fatherly figure with the people is a cultural trait that goes throughout Asia as well. And, so why I'm just mentioning that, I'm going to finish it, is sometimes you get these really ridiculous political commentaries about North Korea, the Stalinist, communist, authoritarian government, as if yes, there's been that there, but I guess what I'm just saying is the history kind of puts a lot of things in context, and you can see where certain things are coming from, whether we are comfortable with those kind of things or not. And anyhow, I don't know, hopefully you found this helpful somewhat or interesting. In any case, this is just my supplement announcement to the end of this chapter. And, one last thing I was going to say. Okay. When I went to the Philippines, because so we have one thing talking about dark-skinned original indigenous people, right? I went up to the north in Zambales, and my daughter's grandfather considers himself Ida, Ada people, which are but that's a tribe that's black with curly hair that are the original people of the Philippines. And I found out the reason why he associated, he says that he's of that tribe is because they lived in the same mountain in a remote area by Mount Pinatubo, this volcano, and they had the same language, and so they were associated with this tribe. But again, I just want to remind you that the Asians in Southeast Asia are not the original inhabitants, and they colonized the area just like whites colonized parts of North America, right? But tracing that history and doing the work on that is much more difficult to pin down and try to explain. So anyhow, the world is interesting. We should never be bored. I hope you're having a good week. And email me if you have any questions.